Hello, Julie.
Hello, Sarah.
How are you in your new home?
Oh my God, I've landed. It's wonderful. I feel like I crossed the Rubicon or something, like I did. I feel like I died and went to another life. Only
Yep.
I'm not in another life. I'm still me. It was intense. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done. And, I can be quite nervous about it even now I'm here. But I have to say, it's getting better. Yesterday was a down moment, but it's starting to feel like home, and I'm starting to be able to tackle more boxes.
Yeah. It's about a 6 month settling time. That's what I read. That's how long it takes. At least
Oh,
here
that's why I figure not till Saturn's in Pisces in March.
in March. Okay. Oh, we got a big March coming up. Sorry to delve a little bit into the future here, but
Very big March coming up,
that's when Pluto goes into Aquarius as
and
well.
Mars goes and Saturn goes into Pisces. Yeah, it's a big month for changes. I
Interesting.
I think we have to get there though. We
We
have
have,
stuff to get through to get
we
there.
have, we have some things to cross over before we get to March.
Although I have to say that I'm really relieved that the full moon in Scorpio wasn't violent. I mean, it
Hmm.
wasn't particularly more violent than it already is. It is violent.
Yeah.
There's violence going on, but it wasn't like the Civil War in the United States started.
Yeah. And it wasn't like a new war start. Well, that we know of. A new
Well, no,
war.
it's bad. What's happening in the Ukraine is escalating. But when they dropped some accidental bomb in Poland, that was pretty scary. But it was very contained. Like even the bomb they dropped in Poland, nobody overreacted. They stayed very calm, and they figured out where it came from and how it happened. And no matter
Mhm.
who dropped that bomb, it was Russia's fault. um, but I think what happened was that the full moon, which looked so wild,
Yeah.
because Mars was retrograde, was restrained.
Ah. Oh, that's
That's
amazing.
really great. Yeah.
Okay, we could
The
count.
Republicans didn't have a sweeping win, and the Democrats didn't have a sweeping win. Like it's everybody has to jockey around and negotiate and act humanly civilized.
Yeah,
And there's
yeah.
there's the climate change conference that was happening. That's been
In,
happening
in
too.
Bali?
Oh, there was there was something in Bali, but no, the cup in Egypt.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, the G20's in Bali. The reason I was thinking that is because I was thinking like, wow, if they're really concerned about the environment, why are they all flying to Bali? But that was my that was my
Why are they all
thinking.
flying to Egypt? Why are they all flying? I mean, if they're really concerned, why don't they stop flying so much?
I know they're so concerned about us.
Mhm.
Um, but anyway, so we could sort of you're saying that we could probably thank the Mars retrograde for keeping things from boiling over or from being overly reactive and
And possibly, I think of Mars retrograde as the best of Mars in a sense, because it asks us to be strategic, right? Mars is a kind of in your face, punchy kind of guy. But when it's retrograde, it's more like the Mars is the ruler of Scorpio. It's more like if you are strategic, when it goes direct, you will have a better trajectory going forward,
right.
right?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
to be strategic now is a good investment for later.
right. Um I seem to remember in the past you mentioning that something was being planned during a Mercury retrograde. Was
A
it
Mars
9?
retrograde. Oh yeah, the 9/11 was happening. Was
Okay. But we're not saying that that's going to happen. We're just saying
No,
that
and actually using that as an example was the reason I like that as an example is because the planets are neutral,
yeah,
right? They don't take sides.
right.
The 9/11 the people who planned 9/11 were very strategic. They were
Right.
getting pilot training in the United States when Mars was retrograde, but their goals were horrible. I mean, if you look at 9/11, there's a whole bunch of other stuff, and that Mars went retrograde. There was a lot about Gemini and Pluto in Sag and Mars retrograde in Sag, and those were the points of war for the United States. It wasn't so
Mm,
much that bad or good things. It's not bad or good things. it's she or he who strategizes when Mars is retrograde is more effective when Mars goes direct.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. It's the consciousness you bring to the Mars retrograde that determines the outcome. So okay, so yeah, we're in it. We're in the Mars retrograde. We're doing it, and I may be speaking too soon, but so far so good. For me, it's been kind of like interesting and not too bumpy a ride, which I can't say for the last 3 or 4 years. So
The worst part was mid-October to mid-November when Mars was squaring Neptune, and we've
yeah,
passed that point, so that's good. I would say in my eighth house, it's taught me that I am my own worst enemy.
okay,
Good eighth house lesson
okay, that's good to know.
so far. I mean, it's only, so if I'm going to be strategic, then I'm going to have to learn, if I am my own worst enemy, how to manage that.
Right. So then you can strategize around how to work with your enemy.
How to work with my fear.
Yeah.
I was so frightened of this move. It was truly off the scale. I don't remember ever having fear like that as an adult.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what eighth house is, isn't it? Isn't it the like the deep fears and traumas and
Yeah, it's
terrors?
projection though. It's also projection, right? It's the projections. Like what makes the eighth house so awful is the fact that you don't know if it's a projection of your own mind or someone really endangering you. You can't tell,
Right.
right? And that's yeah,
That's the challenge of the eighth house.
that's the challenge of the eighth house. That's not so much the challenge of Mars for everyone though. Everyone
Right.
has Mars in their own house.
In their own house for sure. Actually, I had a deep insight about Scorpio or about Scorpio being connected with the eighth house and that whole experience of Halloween when we moved into the Scorpio season. And my Mars isn't in the eighth house, but there was some sort of trauma or something that was kind of sort of digesting in me, and I realized why, because I was walking around the neighborhood and I was seeing all the Halloween decorations and these dismembered bodies and these like spooky parts, and I was like, oh, I totally get it now, because I didn't understand the draw to like spooky things. Like I thought, like, why are we doing this? I mean, I like Halloween, but I mean, I just didn't understand it. But I understood that when there's trauma and you're in the eighth house, there are all these fragmented parts
Absolutely.
that kind of like just hang around in the field, waiting to be digested into the whole, waiting to be communicated with, so that you can move past the fragmentation. And I just had this deep insight walking around my neighborhood. It might be very
Great.
obvious, but
It's great. No,
yeah,
it's not so obvious. When I
yeah,
was young, there was a movie called Repulsion,
yeah.
and it was a classic like psychological horror movie, and hands come out of the walls and stuff like that. And yeah, it's exactly that. It's too much to. I mean, isn't that the definition of trauma? It's too much to integrate.
Yeah, too much to integrate, too scary to see it as
Yeah,
um, part of our life. So it
yeah,
has to kind of hang around in the basement and poke its hand out sometimes, or poke its like dismembered
yeah.
ideas through. Hi, I'm here waiting. So yeah, it was kind of interesting, but that's the eighth house. So I also wanted to talk about the new moon that's coming up in Sagittarius on November 23rd, and the full moon, which is, as you were saying, the full moon on December 8th, which happens to intersect with the Mars retrograde, in that that's the day that Mars opposes the Sun.
And
So
that's
that's
the
good.
day of a Mars retrograde is that. So yeah, it's big. It's big. So the new moon is on the 23rd of November,
Yeah.
and it's at the very early degrees of Sag, 1 degree. It's almost trining Jupiter, except Jupiter is in the end of Pisces and the new moon is at the beginning of Sag, so they're not really in trining signs. But I think what's really interesting about that new moon is if you set it up if you set it up for Washington, D.C., and probably in Ottawa as well, retrograde Mars is on the ascendant.
Oh, really?
So, so there, yeah. So the new moon itself isn't terribly uh isn't terribly what's the word?
Eventful?
Challenging. You know, there isn't a million things to see in it, um, in terms of the way it's setting up. But it's so interesting that Mars, the aggressor, is retrograde on the ascendant of the United States. And so if they're taking my advice, um, and Mars is done squaring Neptune and it's headed toward the trine to Saturn. So it
Okay.
could mean that there's some really important strategy that's taking hold. And, you know, whatever our intention is, we might think about what what kind of strategy we need to anchor ourselves with that, because Mars trine Saturn is a great aspect. It's very, you know, responsible and coherent and the opposite of chaos, actually.
Right. And it's like you take the best of both Mars, which is energized and like ready to go, and the warrior in Saturn is measured and
Right.
contained and has a plan, and you can like those two together could if they and it's in a good aspect, so that means it brings out the kind of the best aspects of both.
Mhm.
All right. And when is that?
The exact, well, the new moon, it's in the new moon chart,
Okay.
but the exact trine from Mars to Saturn is it must be in early December. Let me oh, I can find this in my handy honeycomb. I can find it. I just have to find it. December, here we go. So huh, isn't showing up in December. Mars is retrograde, Saturn is direct. They have to meet up. Maybe it's at the end of November. Let me try that. Sorry,
Okay.
I'm so embarrassed. I should always, oh, here it is, November 28th.
Okay.
November 28th. And that's a really good aspect. And the Mars retrograde square Neptune is also trine Saturn, right? That is the back and forth of the Mars retrograde.
So that adds even more to the strategizing, even more to
Yeah.
like if you want to have a good plan, Saturn is going to help with that good plan.
Yeah, and if you're smart, you won't believe all the bullshit that's going around. Like you'll take your time because um the Neptune Mars square is all about misinformation.
Yeah, and you mentioned last time that can be people being scammed as well. So you're not so.
No kidding. I bought a $50 gift certificate from Swiss Chalet for a friend of mine who loves Swiss Chalet and just got anyway, it was a gift. And they never I paid for it and they never delivered it. Like I don't even know where to begin.
Oh my gosh, and you would expect sort of a recognized franchise to not scam you.
Well, I'm gonna have to call them up and say either you deal with this or I'm gonna write a bad review and I'm gonna tell my credit card company and like
Yeah.
because I did call them once and they hung up on me. Mhm. So don't buy gift certificates from Swiss Chalet. Let me just say to the world.
Okay. Take that down. Swiss
Mhm.
Chalet. Don't trust them. Um okay. So this is the exact kind of opposite of Mars square Neptune. This is Mars trine Saturn, and Saturn. I'll tell you, in my life, like maybe I'll regret this later, but anytime I've had a Saturn transit, I will take Saturn transit over Neptune transit any day. It's hard, but at least you know what you're dealing with
I
Saturn.
agree. I agree.
It's hard work, but if you do it, like you said, then things work out, or the plan you get them. If you what is it? If you lift the weight of Saturn, then you get the muscle, you get the rewards. With
That's right.
Neptune, it's just a big shit show of nothing, and then at the end, is everything's dissolved, and you're like, what the hell was I thinking?
That's right. Neptune is otherworldly.
Yeah.
Creature from the Black Lagoon.
So
Although Neptune trines are very nice. Neptune trines are very mystical and
Mm-hmm.
beautiful, artistic. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right.
People fall in love with Neptune trines, they fall in love.
Okay. Thank you for speaking up for Neptune. That was nice. Falling in love is nice. Okay. So that is the new moon in Sagittarius. Um, around between November 23rd.
The
We
new
could
moon is on November 23rd,
yeah.
and
The
the
trine is the 28th.
so you could say that the new moon isn't close to that degree, right? It's but the new moon will meet up with Mars at the full moon.
And then the full moon. Let's talk about that.
The full moon is on December 7th at 11 p.m., 11:08 p.m. So it's like December 8th, really, December 8th. And the Mars opposition the Sun is December 8th, or Sun opposition Mars. So um, they're together. It's 16 degrees. It's an exact degree hit. So you have Mars opposite this, or the Sun opposite Mars, but you also have the moon conjunct Mars, right? So the sun is opposite the moon Mars conjunction, and the moon and Mars are buddies.
Are they? They get along, hey?
On to the ninth sept.
Okay.
And honestly, in my kind of perfect world where I tell the stories, if Mars bows to the moon, then Mars has all its best traits.
Okay.
When Mars serves life, which is the moon,
Yeah.
then Mars is doing what Mars is supposed to do, which is to protect and to be courageous and make choices that are protective and save the children, that kind of thing. I mean, if you don't have a good Mars, you wouldn't be a very good midwife,
Right. Yes, that makes sense.
right? If
Because
you don't have a good Mars, you wouldn't be a good doctor. Yeah.
yeah, you need that sort of there's a warriorness to those professions. There's almost like a militaristic but and it's service where you're supporting life as
If you think
opposed
of doctors without borders, there's a lot of Mars there,
right,
but it's Mars in service to the moon.
right.
So
Which is
Mars is really only awful when it forgets to serve the moon, which is the story of patriarchy, I guess.
right, where they go off in rabble routes and
Well,
like
no, where they denigrate the feminine.
right.
I was just reading about witches, how they just anything that women had power in, they just burned you at the stake for it, right? If
Yep.
you apparently men were tried, but mostly women were convicted. Anyway,
Interesting.
another story. But the it's not really another story because Mars, when it's disconnected from its purpose, which is to serve the moon,
Right,
Venus are best when they serve the moon,
right.
because they all belong to the night sect. Astrology Toronto has invited a guy named Jason Hawley to come in June of 2023, and he's going to talk about sect for a whole weekend. Be
Oh,
fun.
and yeah, and is that part of what type of astrology does that fall under? The sect?
Sect?
Yeah.
It's one of those things that comes from ancient times, but has been, especially in Jason Hawley's hands, has been modernized.
Okay. It's just a way of
Psychology.
understanding and organizing the planets in terms of their significance and
In terms
their.
of who's strong at night and who's strong in the day.
I see. Yeah. And both Moon and the Mars are strong at night.
Mhm. So if Mars is conjunct the moon and they're opposing the sun, the best story would be that Mars wants to know, how do I serve life, and why should I do what you want if it doesn't serve life?
Right.
So that's the question that we should, when Mars opposes the sun, we should all be asking a difficult question. That's the theme. And the root of that difficult question is, how do I serve life? And why don't I serve life? Why doesn't that come naturally?
Yeah. Oh, that's a very deep question because I mean that's a question that I think we can ask ourselves every day with our choices that we make, in terms of does this choice affirm my actual health and well-being, or does it negate my health and well-being? And not just
Right. And
mine, but
I want to stress the fact that although we ask the question, we don't have to get the answer. The important
right,
thing is the question. Yeah.
right. We usually get the answer afterwards. Right. Like when I was very sick, with chronic illness, um, I was very severe in terms of asking myself that question, and the answer would come back, the consequence would come back very quickly. When I did this, or when I read this, or when I ate this, then I would feel very ill. But when so that wasn't supporting me. So, but the opposite was true. Oh, after I do this, I feel better. So I just kept making the choice. Oh, this person, I feel good after being with this. When I read this or watch this, I feel better. So and then just following that trail led me
Interesting.
into health again.
Sounds like a very Mars opposition sun journey. Yeah.
Yeah. So, it like on a larger scale, on a archetypal scale, it's that on a personal journey. It's asking ourselves, like, what patterns, what daily habits
Hmm.
support. Mars is in my sixth house.
There
what
you go.
what daily habits are in support of my health, and which are not.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And for me, which fears are telling me something I need to know and which fears are not? Very hard question for me to answer.
That's very difficult to discern, but I'm sure if anyone can do it, you can do
Ah, thank you.
it. We'll check back in with you. See how it's going. Um, okay, so we're gonna make it through this season of the we made it through the eclipse season. We're going through the new moon and the full moon of the end of this year, the Mars retrograde, and then what do we have to look forward to before the big shift in when Saturn goes into Pisces and Pluto goes into Aquarius between January and March?
Well, we'll probably talk again before then, but I think that what's really interesting is there's a Mercury retrograde in there from December 29th to January 18th. Mars goes direct on January 12th. Uranus goes direct on January 23rd. So it feels to me like there's a lot of energy moving forward in the second half of January.
Okay, and of course, yeah, the Mars goes forward too. So
Yeah, and that'll take us into the story of 2023. I'm doing my I do it now on the first day of the year, so on January 1st, but you can always just get it on recording. But my look at the year to come, like the 12 moons and the aspects of the year of 2023.
yeah,
I've been, I've been planning that. I've been, doing the research and looking at what the year has in store, and then I'll present that some kind of video thing. But
yeah.
people can show up on January 1st if they want to be there.
Okay, so we'll add that in the description below. We'll put the link in on
I
your
know.
website where they can contact you to be added to the list. And also, I've been reading and listening to your readings that you've been doing on each of the signs on your Patreon account, where
Mhm.
you
There's
have
also
been
words. I give the words and the audio.
right. That's important to note. I tend to listen to it while I'm doing things, which I don't. I'm
A lot
rarely
of
sitting
people do.
still, so
But for those who like to read, it's also there.
it's there in that way too. Yeah, I like to hear your voice. The last one you did on Virgo really touched me. As you take us through, you are taking us through each of the signs, Aries through Pisces, and you've hit, I think, Leo. You've got kind of half of Leo done now.
Libra. I just
Libra.
finished Libra. Scorpio's
Libra.
next.
Okay. And where you explain the origin of the myth of each of the signs, the mythical
Right.
origins of each
So
sign.
what I did was I took a myth from Western culture, sometimes a fairy tale, but a story that Western culture tells, Greek myths for sure. And then I point out how patriarchally twisted it is.
Right, and then you're going to do a workshop in January.
Called archetypal perversion.
Right. So you're building up for this workshop, and
Right,
maybe
but the thing I'm reading onto Patreon was written in 1998.
right. And so you've been working on this for quite a while.
It is the big idea of my life as an astrologer it's what Mary Daly called patriarchal reversal. How
Patriarchal
patriarchy tends
reversal.
to, yeah, how patriarchy tends to take a thing and turn it. So we were talking about patriarchal reversal,
Yes, we were.
and patriarchal reversal is a notion that was coined by a woman named Mary Daly, who was a religious professor or something. And I don't know, I forget, I read her book. Anyway, it stuck, it landed and it stuck with me. And so it's been the kind of underlying, uh, I can't say I didn't think of it before her, that, I mean, I was always arguing with the Greeks. As soon as I met them, I was always going, well, says who? Like, what the hell? Right? Um, I never liked Zeus much. Um, so she just kind of clinched the deal for me.
Right. And there's like another perspective we could have of these signs.
Well, we're awash and immersed in a perspective of dominance.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even say male dominance, just dominance and submission.
Right.
Dominance being the primary one, but white over black and, rich over poor and all sorts of dominances.
Right. And I do appreciate
South,
that. What's that? North
north
of,
over south.
yeah. I do appreciate that that's the term that you use when you teach is dominator culture because it takes it out of the genders. Because
Mhm.
it's just even beyond that, right? Even though that's included in it, even though those exist, the word dominator culture encompasses everything.
Yeah, and I think there's a woman named Rianne Eisler who's done a lot of work. She wrote a book called The Chalice and the Blade, which really changed my life also back in those days. And she wrote another book, which wasn't as compelling, but the title is really good, called The Partnership Way. So
Hmm.
she saw that it was dominance versus partnership.
Right. Yes. Right.
And if we don't work in partnership, we won't make it.
Right. That's right. And so that's, I mean, that was one of the most amazing things I had during your teachings, just to just to for you to just shake that up a little bit to see that. Um,
Well, it's really challenging
yeah.
to put astrology in a partnership framework because astrology is culturally, like, I'm sure there was astrology before there was, let's say, agriculture and, before greed became the dominant motivator. But as far as astrology as a written story goes, um, it's originates in a patriarchal kind of mentality of this whole notion of trying to get above nature.
Right.
So getting astrology down to down to where we can use it is a challenge, but it's a challenge I love actually.
That's a really just blew my mind what you just said. Just like the fact, yeah, just bringing astrology down so that it's not dominating over us and including the narrative, changing the narrative out of the dominator culture is the task. Is the
Mhm.
task of what of I guess what your life's work has been or
And astrology is a great place to do it because, on account of science, astrology has been relegated as bullshit. And so astrologers are free to think what they want, unlike other ologists,
right.
right? And so that means we can be goofy, and there are goofy astrologers, but it means um, we can really play with ideas in a way that's not regulated by the overculture.
Right. Which is really, I find it so interesting that this generation coming up behind me is so fascinated with astrology, but also very bound to science at the same time. It's kind of an interesting uh, fusion of the two that I find.
Frightening.
But what's that?
Frightening. No, but I think it makes sense in the sense that people who are coming up behind you, as you say, are living in such a wild, crazy, chaotic world, that if they can make things more, um, if they can give more structure to the externals, and maybe they feel safer. But I think we have to pick and choose how we use what we get from the ancients, because the ancients were all steeped in male dominance or patriarchal. Or
Julia, I would like to do a deeper interview with you on this because this is even though I know this about you, to hear you express it in these terms, still it blows my mind.
oh, good.
Because we have to, I mean, you've expressed this before, we have to understand that astrology isn't a science and that it's a way that humans have to narrate their inner experience, to give meaning to their experience.
It's an
And
art.
right,
It's art.
right. So it's very interesting. So let's do a talk on this about your journey with astrology and how you've worked with it and
Hey, I'm good.
contrast and compare. I think this will be fun.
And we were also talking about the Mars opposition, that maybe our next talk would be around December 8th, and we would look at at asking people to look at their um, worst fear and
Right.
ask the question of how looking at that fear could help them serve life, the conjunction with the moon.
Right. Yes. Before we do that talk, we will definitely talk about and meet about the full moon, where the sun is opposing the moon in the moon and Mars, as you were describing. Moon and Mars is
Right. Yeah, I think I was saying that if I could, I'd have some kind of ritual where I would ask people to face their worst fears. Is that your dog?
you
Hi, doggy. I think dogs are very Plutonian.
know, they are digging up the underbelly of things.
Yeah, although I don't know
Um,
about white dogs.
what's that?
I don't know about white dogs. White dogs maybe aren't so Plutonian. They're maybe more, you know, upper world.
Maybe, but they do. Their belly gets pretty dirty on a dirty day.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I think it would be fun to have a ritual around that time where we actually have the experience of standing opposing your fear and seeing,
And
what.
questioning. The big question is, why should I do it your way? Right? So the sun is the general, and Mars is the warrior. And the warrior, in the true sense of the word, questions the general.
Why should I carry this out?
Why should I fight your war?
Right. And as you said, the Mars is going to be conjunct the moon, and Mars conjunct the moon is a good aspect to have in that Mars serving the moon is serving the higher nature or the support of life as
I
opposed.
was born with Mars and the moon together, right? My moon is only 8 degrees from my Mars.
Right.
And um, it's very hard to get my Mars to serve my moon. I've had to work very hard at it. I've had a terrible temper.
Right. Well, that's your Mars square sun. On well, no, because your Mars is conjunct your moon, but I do remember your Mars square the sun workshop, which was
Yeah.
very helpful.
Yeah, but I can say from a personal experience that in a culture that, abandons and neglects children and leaves us in many ways to fend for ourselves, the notion that I could channel my anger into something life affirming, it took a long time to get to.
Right. Yeah. But you worked it into your workshops and helped to bring us
Well, I
there
certainly get the
faster.
theory. I get it in theory. In
What's
practice,
that?
I get it in theory, but in practice, I need help, as
For
you know.
sure. For sure. We all do. We all do need help with that for sure. Okay. Well, thank you.
Thank you. It was fun. It's always fun to talk to you.
And we'll meet up around the full moon and see what see what ritual we can create.
Be good. I'd like to do.
Okay, we'll see you then.
Bye.
Bye.